Welcome to Preparing for AI, the AI podcast for everybody, with your hosts Jimmy Rhodes and me, Matt Cartwright. We explore the human and social impacts of AI, looking at the impact on jobs, AI and sustainability, and most importantly, the urgent need for safe development of AI, governance, and alignment. You're the lamp, you're the light, you're the cloud that guides me. You're the way, you're the truth, you're the light inside me. You conquered my fears, so I'll leave it all behind. I'm running to the light. Welcome to Preparing for AI with me, Alan Hansen.
And me, Sergey Brin.
Who?
Sergey Brin.
Oh, Sergey Brin, okay.
What did I say? Sergey.
Oh, come on, Jimmy. You're winding me up.
What do you mean I'm winding you up?
So, welcome to Preparing for AI, the monthly roundup. I think it's been probably 3 months since we did a monthly roundup episode for various reasons, but we're back by popular demand because everyone has been messaging us on Telegraph and all of those underground networks that we use on the dark web, etc., demanding that we come back with another episode like this. So we've followed. The votes matter. It's still a democracy where we live. Actually, it's not a democracy where we live. It's a democracy where
it's Telegram as well.
Yeah. What did I say?
Telegraph.
Yeah. The Daily Telegraph. It's a democracy where you are. Some of you, and for others not. So let's start off. Let's talk about the new models. Shall we?
Yeah, we can do LLMs first. Everyone's favourite subject.
Exactly. So what are the new LLMs? Do you want to start or shall I start?
Go for it.
All right. So, I mean, the obvious one that we should probably talk through, just because it gives me great pleasure to slag off Sam Altman, is GPT4.5. So I think
it was rubbish, wasn't it?
So Claude 3.7 came out before we did the episode where we talked about language models, and then we talked about how GPT was going to bring a new OpenAI was going to bring a new model out, and then they brought one out 3 days later, and we were like, oh shit, do we need to re-record the episode? And then we were like, oh no, actually we don't need to re-record anything because it's basic rubbish.
Yeah, that's the gist of it.
It's not rubbish, but it's literally 12 times more expensive for the API, which doesn't matter to most people because they don't use it. And it's not that much better. But the thing I don't get about it
what they said was, right? What the whole thing, and I think I presume this was a kind of basically panic stations. How do we sell this? And they said it's got better emotional intelligence or EIQ or whatever, exactly. And that was the kind of selling point. But then it was demonstratively worse. Everyone who tested it was like, it's not as good as Claude.
Like days before, Sam Altman's like, yeah, we were almost at AGI, which we may be at AGI, but it's like, this has not made people think we might be at AGI. That's the point. The thing that I find the weirdest about this is like Claude. So I gave a wrong bit of information because I said that Claude is like, the interface kind of combines the two models. Well, it doesn't, because you still actually have to choose a kind of deep thinking mode. But the background model is kind of combines the best parts. The thing I don't understand with OpenAI is they're kind of in this weird thing where now, like my wife's company has got an enterprise model that runs on all the kind of models, and when she pulls down the like models you can use, and it's like 4.0, 0.1, 0.1 mini, 0.3 mini, 4.5, and it's like, why have we got all these models? Like,
it's like trying to figure out which cheese you want at the cheese counter.
Why would you choose any of those models? Like we have said sometimes, like using a more basic model because it's quicker, it's better for certain purposes. But for most people, they just like, which is the best model? And it's like, well, 0.1 is the best model that's mainly available. 0.3 will be better, but you've only got 0.3 mini. And then you've got 4.5, which is not a reasoning model, but it's better than 4.0, but it's not a reasoning model, so it's not actually the best model. It feels just so mixed up. Like I think, from my understanding...
I don't even know what you said there.
Well, I haven't really used it, by the way. But for people I've spoken to who have used it, I've said like, oh, it is better. And I've been like, why is it better? And it's like, well, the answers just seem better. And it's like, but is there anything different about it? I don't really know. And it's like, it doesn't feel like there's any sort of point to it. Like it's just a slightly more polished version of 4.0, and no one knows what the point of it is. And it does feel exactly like you said, like we needed to rush something else out because everyone else has, and we've said we're not going to do any more. We're now going to do reasoning models, but we just need to get out another model that like, we'll just call it 4.5.
Frankly, what does it matter either? Like, what does it matter anymore? We've talked about this before on the podcast. Like people are like, what's the best model? It's like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like the best models now are like better than or at the top in the top 10% of PhD students. I'm not in the top 10% of PhD students in most subjects, so I'm probably not going to even understand what it's on about, to be honest. Like, you just do not need the best model a lot of the time.
Most
anymore.
people don't need the best model at all, because the things they're doing don't require...
Like,
they're asking it questions.
Yeah, if you're writing a PhD, fine. Use like PhD level GPT-3.5 with deep thinking that costs $200 a month, and it can probably massively accelerate your PhD and really help you out with that. I do use some quite advanced models for coding, and I do notice a difference. But that difference, to be frank, is going to go away quite soon. And I'm already, even with my coding, I'm already looking to like, I want a faster model rather than the best model, because they can all basically do the same stuff now. And that's only going to increase. In fact, I'm going to talk about a specific example of that later on, very shortly.
All right, well, jokes aside, 4.5, is it better than 4.0? Yes. Is it the best non-reasoning model from OpenAI? Yes. Is it as good as most of the other models out there? Pretty much, yes. Is there anything special about it? No. Was there any reason for it to be released? I'm not really sure there is. If you're using ChatGPT, should you move somewhere else? Probably not. If you're using another model, should you go to ChatGPT and OpenAI? No. And Sam Altman is a dick as well. So I just want to add that in. Anyway, next.
Blunt.
Well, I hate him. I think we talked about Elon Musk. We talk about Elon Musk a lot recently. I mean, Elon Musk, if Elon Musk's the devil, he's sort of letting everyone know he's a devil. The reason I think Sam Altman is really the devil is if you go into sort of into the Bible and you go into all that stuff, like the devil kind of hides who he is. Like, that's why I think Sam Altman's a devil. But anyway, I digress. Other models. So QWEN, which is Alibaba's new model. Should we briefly talk about that? Because you were talking to me about it, and then I randomly found a story that said it's the best new model.
Oh, it's ace. Yeah. Like, I mean, I've had a go with it today as well. So it literally, the news came out very recently. Why did I have a go with it? Because, so QWEN, for anyone who doesn't know, Alibaba, a Chinese company, they produce coding specific models. So these are like trained specifically on coding. The cool thing about this new QWEN model, which is, I mean, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but like, it was announced in the last sort of like 48 hours, I think. And so just to put this in context, so DeepSeek had a announcement like a month ago, which shook everything up. Their model was significantly more efficient, significantly cheaper, significantly faster, all the rest of it, than GPT-4 and GPT-4.0 at the time, which it was actually better than. It was an improvement, it was better, it performed better in all the benchmarks and all the rest of it. You've probably all heard the DeepSeek stuff. If you haven't, go back and listen to the episode. So QWEN, specifically in the domain of coding, so if you're a coder, this is of interest to you, QWEN is a 32 billion parameter model. The DeepSeek one was 600 billion parameters. QWEN is better, or at least equal. It's basically neck and neck at coding as the DeepSeek model that was like revolutionary like a month ago. QWEN is on a par with that. It's 1/20th the size. To put that in context, like DeepSeek has to run on server farms and all the rest of it still. QWEN, if you've got a decent...
Well, it's on your laptop, isn't it?
Yeah, I can run it on my laptop.
So that's...
And
you've got a big laptop. You've got a gaming laptop, so we should say that. But you've still got a laptop that anyone can go out and buy. Yeah. So this can run on consumer hardware. You can run it locally, and it can code as well as the best models in the world could a couple of months ago. And it can code as well as DeepSeek can and all the rest of it. So insane, in my opinion. Like this kind of stuff Open source?
Well, yeah, it's open source, open... I'm not actually sure if it's open source, open weights. I can never remember Like with the Alibaba ones, I don't know whether they are, but either way, it's open source. It's open source. You can just go and download it on Hugging Face. You can run it in LM Studio. If you're interested in coding, I would suggest having a go with it. The other place you can run it is Grok with a Q. You can just go on there and run it now.
And we're big fans of Grok with a Q. Grok with a Q is, for those who don't remember, is not the Elon Musk model. Grok with a Q is the inference model, so it is like super, super fast. They're basically a company that are creating a new kind of chip called an inference chip, which that's kind of their primary business. But because they're trying to do that,
do, Matt?
do we want to go into the chips on this?
I know. It does inference, I presume.
Yeah, sorry, but it does inference in a different way. Is what I mean. Better, faster.
Yeah,
that's the point.
So
we promoted this quite a lot, but the reason it's so good is because it is so fast, and the reason they offer a kind of interface that uses these models with their chips is to showcase their chips. That's the reason they do it. That's the reason it's free. It's incredibly fast. For those of you that like just using a model occasionally, recommend use it, Grok with a Q, because it's like super cool, super fast, and you don't have to pay anything for it. Let's move on. The last one in terms of models. So this is not actually a large language model as such, but an artificial intelligence agent. And I think this is important because we've talked about agentic AIs and that we're on the verge of them. This is the first that I can or that I've heard of, the first one that appears to kind of actually be able to kind of handle real complex real world tasks. Now, OpenAI and Anthropic have both released to developers a kind of, in fact, Anthropic, I think you can access it if you sign up for it, but it's just called, what is it called? Computer or something really basic.
Yeah. OpenAI's Operator.
Operator, yeah. They've both released these kind of agentic models that can do various basic things. Manus is kind of the same thing, but it feels like it is far more advanced in terms of what it can do. Having said that, so as an agent model, basically agentic models can kind of be commanded to go and do things on their own. So it can, for example, go and people always say like make dinner reservations. I'm not sure, do people make dinner reservations anymore? I mean, I've not made one for a long time, but book things. It can basically go onto your computer or into your whatever your device you're using, and it can go into different things, and it can carry out commands on its own accord. Is essentially like what it can do.
If you, I think the best example of this is like if you completely trusted it, and I think that's probably going to take a little while.
Yes,
but the idea
is where I'm about to go with my talk.
Yeah,
on this,
the idea is you could basically, it's like if you were my PA, let's say, in some imaginary parallel universe, I could just say to you, I'm going to New York next week. I need to meet this guy, this lady. Can you just like sort that all out? Arrange all the times, sort dinner reservations out, the whole lot. And the idea is that it will go off, it will book flights, it will book hotels, it will make all the diary arrangements, it will email people, it will do the whole lot. Like I kind of think the most, and it's not the only use, but I think the most obvious kind of parallel is that it's almost like a digital PA. In terms of like how you would use it in your personal life.
So I'll give you, Ji Chao, who is the presenter of the kind of video, you can look on YouTube, etc., find the video for Manus, MANUS. This isn't just another chatbot or workflow, it's a truly autonomous agent that bridges the gap between conception and execution. While other AIs stop at generating ideas, Manus delivers results. So, like we said, it can, or agents, and so Manus is an agent, can autonomously browse websites, it can leverage different capabilities, it displays its workflow so you can see what it does. My understanding is like a lot of the things that it does, you still need to spend more time to get more of the things that it does. You still need to spend more time telling it and describing what you want to do than it actually takes to do them. So I think at the moment it's not necessarily going to actually gain or sort of give you productivity gains, but it's more about the fact you're kind of looking at the future. You're looking at one of the first version of what you can actually do. You can't just go and log onto it. So if you want to use it, you need to get an invite. So you need to sign up and get an invite to it. It is free to use. At some point in the near future, it's expected to be completely free to use while they kind of trial it. My personal view on this, like my wife asked me the other day, she's like, "Oh, have you tried it?" And I was like, "No, I'm not going to try it." And she's like, "Why not?" I was like, "Because it's basically the way I see it. It's in beta. and
You need to give a
I've
Chinese
no
company
idea what this
full
company
control,
is.
autonomy of your.
Yeah, I mean, I said before, like I don't trust any companies. It's not about them being in China, but like Chinese companies, let's be honest, there's less of a kind of legal framework for if it goes wrong. I'm going to give them access to all my stuff to access it for what's in beta. Like I don't want to be. It's the same way as like when the new version of iOS comes out. Do I download it? No, of course I don't. I wait for 0.1, 0.2 until all the problems have been ironed out. So
Oh, you're one of
personally,
them. I'm an early adopter. I'm an early adopter.
Yeah, but you also understand it more than me. So I wouldn't want to.
I don't think I would download this.
I wouldn't want to have any part of this for a while. But why it's important is there is now something which is like semi-useful, and it's more than just like, oh look, the cursor's moving. Yes, it takes a little bit more time, but you can see the direction of travel. We've said this before. AI today is the worst it's ever going to be. This is only going to get better and better. Agentic models are clearly here. They're clearly going to get better. It's interesting. Watch the video on it. I would say like watch the video, understand agentic models, probably don't download it, don't sign up for it. But, you know, it's the sign of what's coming.
And that is a very nice segue, especially because you said cursor, into the bit that I wanted to talk about my actual experience with an agentic model recently.
All right, I'll play the music and then you can do it.
Yeah, so thanks for the little musical interlude. That indicates that we're transitioning into this part of the podcast. Sorry, what was I talking about? It was
transitioning, I think, was what you were talking about.
Yeah. So cursor. This is something that's been around a while, actually. Like if you're a programmer, you might already have used this. You might already have heard of it. I've started using it recently. I tried things like Devin in the past. I tried some of these like agentic AIs when they were in their infancy, and to be blunt, they were crap. Cursor is what it is. It's an interactive developer environment. So it's an IDE. Any software developers will know what that means. But it's got AI chat built into it. And so with the release, basically I started using this quite recently, and with the release of Claude 3.7, which is one of the best coding models you can use, it is insane. Like if you are even remotely interested in coding, and I don't mean like you're a developer, but like you just want to have a go at trying out one of these agentic models, because you genuinely don't need to be a developer. Like if you are even slightly techie, I would say like have a crack at this, because it is nuts. I've been using it for the last week. It's like I say, it's an IDE that plugs directly into Claude, and you can just describe what you want to create, and it will just go and do it. And it will like
tell it what you just made. Like tell it what. So while we were making this podcast, sorry, not this podcast, while we were making another podcast, giving away the fact we recorded 2 podcasts tonight. While we were recording this podcast, you prompted it to create what?
I prompted it to create a website that blended Matt. It was basically a website for Matt, which blended his love of Jesus, conspiracy theories, and
AI's dystopian future.
I think it was dystopian future, and I think JavaScript or something bonkers like that.
Yes, that's right. I don't know why you added that, but yeah.
And I did this just to demonstrate what this thing can do to Matt, and then I put it in YOLO mode, which is just like, yeah, go for it, like just like create all the files you need, and Matt sat there and watched it. We had a chat for like 5 minutes while it basically created an entire like website. It was like showing off his JavaScript skills, which he doesn't even have, and it was nuts.
Maybe I do. Maybe I've just never told you about my. I mean, if I do, it's pointless now, anyway, isn't it? Like I don't need them anymore.
Exactly. Like the point is that like what it created was actually like a really professional looking website with loads of features as well.
It had what was the thing at the bottom? It had a prayer request board, which would only save locally to your device, where people could request prayers. It had a what was that, like a DI resources for ministries. It had sort of a way to recite Bible verses. It had a way to access conspiracy theories. Like it was, I mean, it had various different pages to it, links to it. It had rotating Bible quotations, and those quotations were not just like random quotations. They also matched with things about coding. It even gave an example. It didn't have like you could change the quote, but it was saying, what was it about? You should challenge your faith, and in the same way, you should challenge all of your code to ensure it's correct. Like, it was incredible what it had done.
Yeah.
In literally like 5 minutes.
Yeah, in 5 minutes, created a full website, like, you know, with actual features and working applications and all this kind of stuff.
I think it's probably difficult for anyone listening to understand quite like how incredible, like what you did was you didn't write any code.
Yeah.
You used Claude, which is integrated within it. You asked it, you wrote a very small prompt, asked it for a prompt, pasted it into itself, set it in a mode, and then every couple of minutes you would say, yeah.
Happy
And that
with
was
the
it, and it just it created an entire website based on that.
The point is that like it's in a relatively narrow domain compared to what we're talking about with agentic AI in terms of like, you know, assisting you as a PA or something like that. But if you're a coder and you haven't tried Cursor, if you're a coder and you're kind of like, well, you know, AI is not really going to affect my job. And I know, to be fair, like a lot of coders I know do already use AI tools.
The coders that are saying that. I mean,
I think there are.
Really?
Yeah. I think there are. I think there's a lot of. I'll be honest. I'll be completely blunt. I think there are a lot of coders that are in denial about AI and how it's going to affect them. And it's not that it's going to steal your job, but it's like you. I'm sure most people are already using these kind of tools, especially if they're developers. But if you're not, I would probably recommend like at least having a crack, because I think you need to. A lot of people that I hear, like, and so if you work in that industry, I've spoken to people. If you work in that industry, there is an element of like defensiveness about this. Like, this is a skill that I've got. This is what I can give, right? This is what I can give to the world.
It's cognitive dissonance in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I'm not saying that like AI is going to just replace you and completely get rid of, you know, your entire utility. It still needs humans at the helm to like come up with the ideas and interact with it and all the rest of it. It can, at the moment, we're in a place where it can just 10x, whatever, 20x your performance. And there are still things that it gets wrong as well. Like, it's not perfect. You still need to have a certain level of understanding, I would say, to use it, because it's not that straightforward yet. But sort of harking back to what Matt was saying, like, this is the worst it's ever going to be. Like, that's absolutely true. And like the rate and the pace of change at the moment is insane. So if you're a developer and for some reason you're probably under a rock and you're not using this stuff, or if you're in denial about it, honestly, I would say check out some of these things, because they can do some pretty advanced stuff now.
All right. So sorry, you're saying to sort of coders and developers, fine. We don't think there's a lot of them in our audience. People who are listening to this podcast, I'm going to take out the people who are just listening because, you know, they just want to have a very basic understanding of AI, and actually then, you know, they're not that interested, but they don't want to be completely out of the loop. But for those who are kind of interested, but it's kind of like, you know, it's not the main thing in my life, I just want to kind of keep up to date and I want to kind of check in and out of these tools and use them. Can they use this?
I would say yes. I would say I'm not going to give you a tutorial right now, but I would say the way to use it is download Cursor or something similar. There are other similar apps. Do a bit of like, go on the Cursor website, understand how to use it a little bit. So just have a bit of a read on there. Then within Cursor itself, because it's going to connect to Claude 3.7, something like that, tell it what you want to create. Probably the simplest thing to create is something like a basic HTML website. Have a chat with it and just be like, this is my idea. Like, these are the kinds of things I want to include. Get it to give you a prompt that you can then use to actually generate what you want to generate. And then feed that prompt back into it in what's called agent mode, which will make sense if you download it. And
this is pretty simple. Like, this sounds, if you think, oh, this is confusing. No, it's not. Like, when you look at it, it's pretty easy to follow.
basically it's like basically if you think the part where I'm saying like put your idea into it and ask it for a prompt, that's like saying go and speak to a professional developer and translate what I want into a technical language that the computer will understand. Think about it like that. And then take that prompt, put that back in what's called agent mode, and that will basically set you off on the path to generating whatever it is you want to create. And I genuinely think it sounds, as Matt says, it sounds a little bit complicated, but it's not that complicated. And actually, there's a load of probably tutorials and stuff like that on YouTube as well. If you've ever like got that creative urge to be like, I want to create a website, I want to create a business, and this is kind of my ideas, but I don't know how to do it, this could be like a really cool tool to give a go.
That's a really good way to explain it.
I mean, what was your experience? Because I showed this to you for the first time tonight.
I mean, for me, like, and I asked you, but I mean, for me, it was like, fine. All I wanted to understand was like, okay, do I need to do that within something like Anaconda? Do I like, or can I, is it just, I do this within Cursor? Is Cursor integrate with something else? Like, that was my question. But actually, in terms of using it, I'm pretty sure I could just go home, download it, and with like, give me half a day to mess around with it, I could use it, no problem. I think even for those people who are not, or who would say like, they're not necessarily that tech literate, like, you'd only need a bit of time to get used to it and to give yourself the confidence to feel like this is not something like, I don't understand coding, is like, well, it kind of doesn't matter. Like all the code that's going on in the background and all the stuff you can see, well, you don't need to really understand it. Obviously, if you understand it, and this is where kind of coders are still at an advantage, is when it does do something wrong, when you need to correct it, like that's where your knowledge steps in. But to do the very basic stuff, you don't need to do that. The one question, like, I know I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but for someone who does go, okay, yeah, I'm going to mess around with this, and I'm going to create this website, is like, okay, you create this website, and then what do they do? Like, if they actually are like, yeah, okay, this is my business, what do they do with that website then?
It's a good question.
And they haven't actually bought the domain. Like, I guess that's the point, just to express to people, is like, you're not posting a domain with this.
No.
You know, like when you set something up, you don't own it. You're still going to have to do some work if you want to really convert it into a business.
Yeah, with the specific example of using a website, yes. I think I'll be honest, like I think that at that point, so I would say that the way to use it would be, this is what I want to create. Help me put it on a page and show me what it looks like. I'll be honest, like it's not at the point yet where you can take that and then put that online and actually create a business. At that point, you're probably then talking about actually talking to a developer, but then it gives you something that you can show to them and say, look, these are my ideas, but not just in a Word document or in a paper or whatever. Like actually, I've worked with an AI to sort of produce something that looks kind of like what I want it to look like. And because it's a chatbot, you can reiterate over it, you can chat with it, you can be like, I don't like the way that looks, I want to change the color, I want to change the text. It really, like, creatively, it's incredible. Like, it gives you the opportunity to play around with, just like open up, like have a go with your creative side, like play around with things, like see how things work. And because you can talk to these LLMs in a natural way, you can then go and tweak that and all the rest of it. If you want to turn it into a business, honestly, I'd recommend probably going and speaking to a professional developer, but it will get you...
give them a last paycheck before they go completely...
Yeah, exactly. And but also it might just give you a bit of motivation because you can suddenly sort of see what this looks like. I genuinely think this stuff is pretty cool, and like it's not for everyone, but you know, if this sounds interesting to you, then give it a go. And there are tons of like help and support and videos and YouTube and stuff like that.
Sound, mate. So maybe you could do like just a kind of roundup news update. There's a few, I think, sort of small enough stories. Maybe just run around them, and then we'll hit a more heavy one. Yeah,
absolutely. Some of this stuff is stuff that I'm not as familiar with, I guess, for want of a better word. So, so I think like one of the things that's been released in the last month is VO2, which is Google's advanced video generation model. And so this is something that I think people are using on YouTube Shorts, mostly because these video generation tools, they tend to generate shorter length videos, but it can actually generate high quality videos from text prompts. And it's just like, I mean, I don't know whether this is a good thing or not, but lowering the barrier to producing things like YouTube Shorts, basically. I'm not sure I'm keen on that actually at all, but
it's sort of democratization in a way. But yeah, I'm with you. Well, we talked about this on previous episodes about creative industries and stuff, but you know, a lot of people will be interested in it. I still think it's sort of gimmicky, but like, yeah, messing around with text prompts and video, it does look pretty amazing. I've got to say, like, from what I've seen, it is pretty amazing. And I should add, like, the other day, Sora, which is the OpenAI one that I keep forgetting the name because it's been so long since like they hyped it to it actually coming out. It's now available in the UK and the EU.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, which it hadn't been for a long time. So this week, as we record this, which is sort of early March, it finally was released in the UK and the EU.
Early March 2025, just in
2025, yeah. In case we wait a long time for the launch of this episode.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is this like Sora, the same Sora that got released,
this is the
demonstrated like a year ago?
Well, I mean, it's the same program. I mean, I would imagine the iteration is much further on, but I think this, like the fact you're asking that question as someone who is like bang up to date on AI news, kind of says it all. That we recorded our second episode of this podcast around the creative industries, and we were like, Sora. It's Sora, the end of the creative industries. And now a year on, and by the way, as we record this, is one day after our 1 year anniversary. You're like, oh, is that the same Sora? And I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, I forgot it's been released in the EU. I think that perfectly shows how some of this stuff that, don't get me wrong, it might be in 3 years' time, like, you know, every single movie is being animated and created by AI. I don't think it will be that.
Probably a little bit, yeah.
But I think this kind of shows how, like, the reason I think this is overhyped is because it's not a useful use. And I come back to this thing I've said a few times of like, the AI things that are going to really work are where they are resolving a problem that actually needs resolving. It's not a problem that needs resolving. It's just a novel thing.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but like, and I've had this a little bit today with when I've been trying to work on stuff. It's like chucking the content into some of the stuff I was doing earlier on, which was like a presentation using this cursor thing. Chucking the content in took like 20 minutes. Actually refining that to get to something that looked great and looked how I wanted it to look, my like creative vision, so to speak, it took a lot longer. And I feel like that's the same thing, but like on steroids with things like Sora, where if you're in the creative industry, like you're a creative person, you have a vision for what you want. To have to then translate that by typing a text prompt in that then results in something that's like probably quite distant from what you actually originally envisioned in your mind. What was it's probably just quite frustrating.
What was the Luma one? Do you remember the Luma one? I've got Luma downloaded on my phone because you had to download the app to access another. It was like a Chinese.
I think it was
the Kuaishou one, and then there was the other. I mean, it's the same thing as like it was released, and then it was kind of like we did a video and I tried to do something. It was like some squid like came out of my face, and then I sort of turned into this like weird, bizarre kind of David Lynch film creature, and it was like, what the fuck was that? Like that wasn't what we'd asked it to do. And I think that's the point. Is like it makes something from a text prompt, which is amazing, but it's like a text prompt. Like when you're thinking of something, like there's a lot of layers of detail to that. So what it makes is like, it's not that what it makes is not amazing, but it with a very small prompt, it bears no resemblance to what you actually thought of.
Yeah.
That's the problem with this stuff at the moment, I think. Like you're going to have to write like an incredibly detailed prompt to get anything that you really want out of it.
Yeah, and it sort of hits the nail on the head as to why language models, large language models have been so impactful, whereas some of the like distillation, like images and video stuff has been less impactful, because it's like when you're using language, it's actually relatively precise and you can get what you want out of it. Whereas, whereas with like images and video, I feel like that you've got this image in your head, you've then got to convert it into language. Then the model's got to convert that language back into this image or video, and it's just it's definitely not as effective. And I don't know if that's a limitation of the models or like a limitation of exactly what I'm talking about, though.
I don't think it's the models. I don't think it matters what you create, actually, to some degree. And I was thinking this about like an image. Like you see the most beautiful image of a sort of, okay, for me, it's always like, it's lakes and mountains. Like that's the thing I like an amazing fjord, right, with mountains on the side. You could create a better AI image of that's more amazing than the actual reality. But why is that image so amazing to me? It's because that is a thing and I'm like, wow, that thing exists, I want to go and see it. If it's just an image of a thing just because it's an image of a thing, well, just, you know, make me a 1 million mile high mountain with, you know, purple water in it, and it's like, yeah, that looks cool, but like, well, it's not a real thing. So kind of what's the point in it? Maybe for generation in the future, this is not relevant because they grow up with this. I don't know. But I just feel like the generation of images as well, like any AI image I see still, and I know it will get better and better, but when I see it, I'm like, well, it's an AI image. And part of the reason I know it's an AI image is not because the quality is not good enough. It's because, well, that thing isn't a real thing. So yeah, we're going off tangent a little bit here, but I do think it's the images and the video creation from text that we thought was going to be like destroying the system.
Yeah.
Like, I think we misunderstood or underestimated like how important the fact that those things are reality rather than they just look beautiful was.
Yeah.
And so that's a use that I'm definitely of the view, like in the short term, at least, like it's not going to be that impactful.
Yeah, I agree. And then combined with what I was saying around, it's just, I think if you're a creative, it's just too hard to get, like, to translate the image in your head to language, to put into a large language model, to get it to properly understand what you're visualizing. Because presumably the idea was this was going to replace certain elements of CGI. And
that's the thing, it'll probably do that.
Well,
it's
again,
more for me about like for me as an individual, like I far prefer to take a photo and look at it than create a really amazing image.
Oh, yeah.
I don't doubt that it will replace like a lot of, you know, fantasy, for example, like, you know, a fantasy drama or whatever. Yeah, of course it can create that and probably do it really well.
No, but my point is that like you like in the translation of, you know, what your creative like image that you've got in your head to language, into a language model, back to an image, like that's not good enough. Yeah. I think it might speed up the process in terms of like you can create the first frame or image or whatever, and then it can fill in the gaps. But I don't think it's ever going to understand like.
So if you're spending more resource than you would on creating a drama or a film, like it's really not like the point of the efficiency gains is gone because you're actually spending more time and then getting something that's not as good.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Anyway, moving on because we meant to like zoom over these, didn't we?
Intend to spend like 10 minutes on that. Accelerate. So I was going to say on a lighter note, but this was way back when. So accelerating scientific discovery. Google have now got an AI co-scientist platform. So this is using Gemini's multimodal capabilities, and it's actually demonstrated remarkable potential in biomedical research. It generated novel hypotheses for antimicrobial resistance mechanisms that were subsequently validated by laboratory settings, which is quite interesting. Basically, like shortening the ideation to testing cycle from months to days. So the whole idea here is basically in biomedical research, you have to come up with hypotheses, you have to test them, blah, blah, blah. This is like something that can like massively speed up that process, and probably rule out some stuff that isn't probably useful in the meantime as well. So yeah, like there's some really interesting stuff going on in that area. Like similarly, this is even cooler in a way. So MIT's Sybil model represents a massive leap in cancer prevention. And this is an article from, again, within the last sort of month. So basically utilizing low dose CT scans as opposed to, much heavier use of radioactive materials, which is what gets used to help diagnose cancer patients. And it can predict lung cancer risk up to 6 years in advance with 89% accuracy. So basically, this is like AI being used to find patterns in data that is just, for whatever reason, imperceptible to human radiologists. And so it's helping to helping to identify high-risk patients for early intervention, potentially reducing mortality rates by around 20% in pilot studies. There's also a Cambridge University analysis of 12,000 tumour genomes, which has revealed 58 new mutational signatures linked to environmental carcinogens and cellular malfunctions, probably very important in today's world where we have more and more carcinogens like plastics and microplastics and all the rest of it. So the whole point of this section, I guess, is there's a whole bunch of medical stuff going on that, actually it's not very mainstream, it's not in the news, it's not like DeepSeek and exciting stuff like that, but it's making huge impact and huge strides in things like cancer diagnoses and supporting radiologists and things like that. So really important, especially as we have a aging population right now.
There's a lot of amazing stuff going on in the medical sphere, and I haven't talked about big pharma for a while. But I've said, for me,
but you're about to.
No, I'm not really.
Oh,
but
okay.
then sort of I'll touch on it in case my friend Rahul's listening. I've said from the beginning that I think potentially in the short term, and the short term I mean in AI terms, the next 2-3 years, the biggest potential gains are in the medical sphere, because if it's done right, because what AI is good at doing is, looking at huge patterns of information.
Yeah.
And that's where with medical data, it's just fantastic, because it's able to do it on a level that we're just not able to do. And it's able to look at possibilities and at least narrow kind of things down in the anti-aging space. So another of the things that I spend a lot of my time listening to is kind of anti-aging. I'm big into kind of supplementation, nutrition, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Which is really fascinating, really fascinating about how we can potentially, improve kind of lifespans, how we can look at all kinds of different pathways and how they work and stuff. And I think it's great. But it does come back to my big fear on all of this stuff is, I guess with everything, it comes down to people, and it's who controls this stuff. And, that is always for me the fear in terms of kind of medical, is all of these great ideas and democratizations. Unfortunately, if they start to find ways to improve lifespan and lifestyle that don't make money for big pharmaceutical companies, I just fear that they get kind of suppressed, or the message doesn't get out there. I hope not, and maybe open sourcing, like you often say, is the answer to that. But it's just my big fear. I am still confident it's going to make massive change, but I'm always worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think effectively what you're saying is can somebody make cash off this?
Exactly.
And
well, no, can existing big pharmaceutical companies make cash off it?
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Exactly. And where I was going with that is, if you cure these things, then
they can't.
The opportunity is wasted to a certain extent. To be really blunt, that's not what I think, but you come up with a cure for cancer, and it's great, but the profit opportunity is lost, right? So I don't know. It's an age-old thing. I think that it goes back to it's a very different thing, but it goes back to somebody apparently invented the everlasting light bulb at some point, but we never actually got to see it.
There's a whole nother podcast we could do, not on medical sort of AI, but just on and not on big pharma, but on the whole kind of way in which
capitalist system.
No, I wasn't going to say that. Just the whole way in which kind of.
But it is that.
but I'm talking more about here, like about medicine and about how a lot of these things work in terms of like the way that the human body works and understanding the human body, and that's why functional medicine and stuff makes so much sense to me. But it's a different podcast, so we'll move on. I'll play the fun jingle and we can do our last point. So I think it's been a long time. It used to be my favourite subject. I haven't talked about it for a while, but I think we're going to talk a little bit about regulation, aren't we?
Sounds like it. Yeah. So the EU AI Act's first wave. I'm reading this out in case you can't tell. Regulation's not my strong point. February the 2nd, 2025 marks the activation of Chapter 1 and 2 provisions under the EU AI Act, establishing stringent requirements for prohibited practices and mandatory literacy programs. I don't really understand what that means. Banned applications now include subliminal manipulative techniques that impair free will, social scoring systems by public authorities, real-time remote biometric identification in public spaces, with narrow exceptions. And then, so basically the EU are pushing this, I don't even know. Well, I suppose the AI part is the social scoring stuff, and like biometric identification in public spaces basically means, facial recognition, which is definitely AI. It has to be AI. So the EU are pushing to reduce or impair or like reduce the ability to do all of these things. So basically use AI to monitor people. I quite like the subliminal manipulative techniques that impair free will. That seems very broad. This is a summary from Perplexity, but like I would say based on the episode that we literally just recorded about the technocracy, like we're already there, to be honest. So I'll be interested to have a bit more detail on what that actually entails.
I wasn't necessarily going to be able to answer too much about it. What I was trying to find was a really good quotation actually on it. But let's talk a little bit, I guess, about sort of regulation in general, because I want to sort of dial back a little bit rather than just answer your question and say, there was an AI safety summit that happened in Paris. Was it like a month ago? Not actually that long ago. I think it was February. And they've even changed the name of it. It's now no longer the Safety Summit. I think it's the Security Summit, and which doesn't sound like a huge change, but it is a big change because, it's obvious that the narrative, particularly as it is led by the kind of the US side, has moved away from safety. And JD Vance has kind of said that, we're not going to sacrifice gains for the US, basically for anybody. And it feels like that's kind of the same everywhere. Like you don't really see any country that's kind of pushing on it. Even the EU, which is sort of, they've got the EU Act, but Macron has very much kind of come out and is talking about it, probably because they have Mistral in France, which is the only kind of European AI, I don't want to call them a giant, but like reasonable sized player. Like they're a giant in kind of European terms. And so like we seem to have moved away from really caring about it or it being a big issue. Having said that, and there's a really good article this week by Ezra Klein, which talks about the US government knows that AGI is coming. And I agree with that. Like, I think the definition of AGI has changed, but, AI is kind of coming. And I think the US, it looks like they don't care because they watered down, or Gavin Newsom voted against the kind of California AI Act. But I think, in the next year or two, because of some of the things that we've discussed that are going on, like bigger issues around AI and tech and its control, that people are going to push for more regulation. Now, the thing for me is that whether that regulation is really regulation, whether that regulation is actually just playing into the hands of the big players, whether it's regulation because it's, in the way that they want it to, or whether it's really regulation to protect people's interests. So I thought I would quote something from Louisa Jarofsky, who I think is probably, certainly in terms of like Substack and social media, I think is probably the number one sort of writer on AI governance stuff. Her newsletter is just titled Louisa's Newsletter. That's Louisa, Luiza, which kind of makes it sound like it's a bit amateur. I think she should change it because it sounds like it's not that serious. But like, I think she's the number one on this. And she just posted a couple of days ago, and she said, I've been writing about AI governance for over 2 years, and many people don't understand why it matters or why they should care. Reminders. I just think this is just perfect explanation. Tobacco companies don't care if you develop lung cancer. Social media companies don't care if you are constantly anxious. And AI companies don't care if you become dependent and manipulable. I think it's the second one. So the point here, like this kind of governance stuff is not about, like it maybe should be, and maybe in some way is about kind of existential threats. And it's not about kind of stopping development. And it's not at this level necessarily about like these things that feel like they're years and years away. It's about the fact that the companies that are developing these things want you to dependent on them and want to be able to manipulate and control what you do. And that is what I think you should remember when it comes to governance and alignment of AI. Is the only way to keep companies in check, massive companies that are controlling not just, sects of society, but potentially are controlling the whole of society, controlling countries and government and the way that people think. The only way to keep them in check is some form of governance that is separate from them. And that's keeping the law separate from government, because let's face it, government in the US in particular is in the hands of big tech.
Yeah, we were talking about changing our logo, but I feel like it's more relevant than ever, to be honest, having just done this episode and the one before, which is kind of fitting on our anniversary. Maybe we'll tidy it up a little bit, but I totally agree. Like the danger here is that this all just kind of slips away from us. Regulation gets cast aside because, it's going to get cast aside, in the interest of progress.
In the interest of what's being kind of perceived as a geopolitical battle of good versus battle. Evil, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, that's how it's being portrayed.
Yeah,
if the good West doesn't win, then evil China will win.
Yeah, it's not just the interest of progress. I guess things were ticking along nicely, and then you get things like DeepSeek and things like that, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, no, we're cancelling all our commitments to AI safety. We're not going to ban AI use in military applications, all that kind of stuff. Like within a few days of those kind of things. So that stuff goes out the window very quickly. The EU is always very noble in this sense, but I feel like it's increasingly isolated in this respect as well. And also, like, I mean, I don't mean this in a nasty way, but to a certain extent, when, like you say, Mistral's kind of the one big model that I can think of in the EU, and no one's really heard of it, it's like, who really cares what the EU are doing?
True.
When it comes to AI, like who, does it really have a big influence?
The only thing I would say on that though is that, like, if you take like a lot of the laws, like take data protection, right? Take what the EU did on data protection. Other places have followed because it was easier to follow what the EU did and to have access to that market, right? Yeah. So there is a way in which you kind of set the standard. And so even the US, has followed on some stuff because it's just for businesses, it's easier to do it. The difference with AI is like, is that how they're going to make their money?
Yeah.
Like, is it really they're going to make their money through whether they've got access to that market, or are they going to make their money because they're just going to have control and be so ubiquitous that you have no choice but to use them? And if you're not using them, then they're going to control you anyway because they're better than you. I think that's the difference in this technology. But I still think like there was still kind of hope that if we just take the US out of this, like the rest of the world got together, that it would still kind of be like, well, okay, we've at least got to kind of water ourselves down a little bit to kind of comply with that stuff. Because like I said, we're not talking here about existential threats at this point. We should be, and it should factor into that. And I think that will come in time as it becomes more of a, more apparent to people.
More pressing, yeah.
But we're talking about things that are like existing uses of that technology.
Yeah.
Because if you had in EU law stuff around like deep fakes or the use for kind of jobs, etc., then maybe you would see other countries take a different approach. I just want
if I sound slightly skeptical though, it's because there are definitely examples that you can quote where the EU has had that influence. However, I think there are also just as many examples where Google just do whatever they want anyway and then pay the fines in the EU.
Yeah.
And so
it's just the cost of doing business, right?
Yeah, and so I think there are some. I mean, a big example that like people always quote is like they forced Apple to change the iPhone chargers to not be a like a Apple patented design, and now they're using USB-C or something like that. But like, I do think those examples get quite hyped. Yeah. And then there's also plenty of counter.
They still control the Apple Store. They still control like stream, or not just Apple, but streaming, etc.
Exactly.
I just want to finish, I guess, this section, probably the whole podcast. The Ezra Klein article that I taught before. This kind of links in a little bit to this, because I was thinking it's something where like maybe if the EU or someone could do this first, like it would be a case of like raising all the other ships. Was actually a talk about like why UBI will not happen, right? And they were saying like UBI is just politically untenable, particularly in places like the US. But what this article talked about, which I think is kind of fascinating and really kind of resonated with me, was this idea that actually what it could be instead is like you incentivize or punish organizations for firing people. So you basically say, okay, well, AI is going to make you these savings, but if you don't have any people working for your organization, you're going to have to pay a big tax or whatever, or you're going to have to hire people to get this subsidy or whatever, or the more people you hire versus AI in terms of the ratio that you've got, the more that we will allow you to benefit from these things within the model. That's the kind of thing that I think the EU could do first, that then could potentially pull up like the US, etc. Because you may think that sounds kind of ridiculous, but UBI is not happening ever in the US. So that's the only kind of hope, would be something like that would kind of pull the US in line.
Yeah, I mean the situation you've described there, I'll be honest, like sounds like a terrible situation where you've got you end up so the way the thing my mind leaps to immediately is you're basically employing people just to sit around because AI is going to do all the work, but we need to employ a bunch of actual humans to just sit around because then that meets our quota. I feel like that might be the end point of that, which like almost to talk about the useless eaters analogy that we had before, like that almost takes it to the ultimate version of it in a way. I'm
not sure it does. And I said that this is the last point. I'm not sure it does, because the point in the sort of work environment is like AI is cheaper than people. Like ultimately, that's the reason why it's more efficient, because it can do things cheaper than people.
Yeah.
That's because the price of people, because the market has created the price of people. Like we could just, if we said, well, okay, AI requires data. If we said the price of electricity is £1 billion for 1 watt of electricity, then AI is no longer cheaper than people. So it's only
you
about...
You also can't wash your clothes, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a terrible example. But like, I don't know, whatever the thing... Okay, silicon. Like, silicon costs £1 billion per gram.
It goes back to your tax point. Like, if you tax AI so heavily that it costs as much to employ an AI as to a person.
You incentivize it, whichever way around you want to make it. Anyway, my point was that I think this, for me, as I understood this... And as someone who, as you know, like thinks that UBI, I loved UBI a year ago. Then I read and listened to the useless eater stuff. Then I'm completely bought into the fact it would just create that in society. When I hear this, I'm like, Yeah, that gives me a bit of hope, because I think that is a more palatable model. The reason I think it sounds like ridiculous is because it's so different from what we currently have. But whatever we're going to have in the future is going to be completely different from what we currently have. So we need to kind of like stop thinking of like, oh no, that's impossible because of our current world, and be like, well, is that better or worse than the alternative? I think it's better.
I agree with that sentiment. I'm not going to... Let's not belabor the point here.
Yeah.
We're probably going to carry on arguing about it afterwards, to be honest. But let's spare everyone else.
All right. Well, we'll release a director's cut of this podcast that will include another 3.5 hours of me and you
Of debate.
debating useless eaters versus incentivizing by taxing people for using AI.
Yeah.
Or companies for
so you
taxing
can all just
AI.
go and sit around in the office and do nothing, which we
So
do.
sign up
which
to
everyone
our,
does anyway.
Sign up to our Patreon and you will have access to that.
Yeah.
All right. We're 10 seconds short of an hour, so let's say goodbye.
Yeah. Song on that.
What?
Song.
Oh, yeah. Song. Have a good week. Bye.
Yeah.
Gather round, folks, it's that time again. Jimmy and Matt got news to spin. AIs are changing, the world's on fire, but these two cats take it higher. Swing and jive, don't be shy. Jimmy and Matt got the lowdown why. Chatbots dancing, circuits prancing. Hold on tight, it's a wild AI ride. Twist, machine minds groove. Jimmy's got the facts, Matt's in the mood. Deep fake faces, robots talk. Even old chat GPTs learn to rock. Well, it's LLMs and GPUs. Quantum brains with digital shoes. Hopping and bopping, they're keeping it tight. AI's moving and it's out of sight. Tune on in, don't miss a beat. These two cool cats can't be beat. From silicone dreams to chatbot schemes, Jimmy and Matt are the kings of the stream. Swing jive, don't be shy. Jimmy and Matt got the lowdown why. Chatbots dancing, circuits prancing. Hold on tight, it's a wild AI ride. Well, neural nets twist, machine minds groove. Jimmy's got the facts, Matt's in the mood. Deep fake faces, robots talk. Even old chat GPTs learn to rock. Well, it's LLMs and GPUs. Quantum brains with digital shoes. Hopping and bopping, they're keeping it tight. AI's moving and it's out of sight. So tune on in, don't miss a beat. These two cool cats can't be beat. From silicone dreams to chatbot schemes, Jimmy and Matt are the kings of the stream.